Hello YouTube and welcome back. This is Nico and you're watching Dare to Game. Today we'll be doing something a bit different, and that is discussing a TV show. I understand this is a bit of a departure from my regular content, but seeing as the gaming world is in one of its signature dry spells, and I just recently started watching Game of Thrones for the first time ever, I might add, I figured it'd be a fun side project to do a season retrospective for each season while watching the show. Give my first impressions and discuss how I feel about the houses, characters, and overall story of that specific season. With all that in mind, remember there will, of course, be spoilers for the first season of Game of Thrones in this episode. So, if you would like to avoid that, this video is not the right video for you, and I would recommend that you leave now. So, let's just get right to it. So, for starters, I know what many out there may be thinking. Yes, I know it's surprising that anyone hasn't watched Game of Thrones already. But the short and sweet reason is that I just wanted to wait until it was all out before I started watching it. And for those of you out there who are like me and haven't seen it before, don't worry, because you're not alone. So let's get this started with a brief synopsis of the events of this season. So for the first episode, it's titled Winter is Coming, and that's a line that you'll hear a lot in this show. This episode, of course, kicks off the series and introduces us to the most important characters of the first season. These, of course, being Eddard, Ned Stark, played by Sean Bean, and of course his whole family. We're also introduced to the king, Robert Baratheon, played by Mark Addy, and his wife, Cersei Lannister, played by Lena Headey, their son, Joffrey, played by Jack Gleeson, and of course Jaime Lannister, played by Nikolaj Coster-Waldau. Definitely the hardest name in the show. In addition to this, we have quite possibly my favorite character, Tyrion Lannister, being played by Peter Dinklage. King Robert Baratheon and his queen Cersei Lannister travel north to make his old friend Eddard, Ned Stark, Lord of Winterfell, the offer to be the new Hand of the King after the previous one, Jon Arryn, died under mysterious circumstances. Across the Narrow Sea, the exiled Prince Viserys Targaryen offers to trade his sister Daenerys to a violent Dothraki horse lord in exchange for his army. He hopes to use them to take back the throne which was taken from his father by Cersei's brother, Jaime, back in Winterfell. Ned's 10-year-old son, Bran, discovers that Cersei and Jaime are involved in an incestuous relationship. Jaime pushes Bran out of the window to keep him from telling anyone. And that's basically what happens in the first episode. Episode 2 is titled The King's Road. And in this episode, Bran Stark is in a coma after having been thrown out the window of the tower by Jaime Lannister. His mother, Catelyn Stark, believes that his fall was the result of a murder attempt by one of the Lannisters. Ned, having accepted the role of Hand of the King, must leave Winterfell for King's Landing, much to his wife's dismay. Jon Snow, Ned's bastard son, leaves as well to join the Night's Watch, an army of men who protect a giant ice wall from undead White Walkers and savage wildlings. Instead of returning to King's Landing with his family, Tyrion Lannister goes with Jon Snow to the wall. During a misunderstanding, Arya Stark's pet direwolf bites Prince Joffrey Baratheon and then runs off. As punishment, her sister Sansa's direwolf has to be killed by Ned, and this leads to a conflict between Ned Stark and Sansa for the next while. Episode 3 is titled Lord Snow, and in this episode, after Ned Stark arrives in King's Landing, he realizes how poorly the government of Westeros is being managed. Bran Stark is informed that he will never walk again after his fall from the tower. Catelyn travels to King's Landing to warn Ned of her suspicions of the Lannisters' involvement in the attempted murder of Bran. During her visit, she learns that the dagger found after the assassination attempt on Bran belonged to Tyrion Lannister. On the wall, Jon Snow struggles to fit in with the rest of the Night's Watch. He impresses Sir Alliser Thorne, at least a little, being told he is the least useless person here. Episode 4 is titled Cripples, Bastards, and Broken Things. In this episode, Ned tries to find information in King's Landing to explain the death of the previous Hand of the King, and in the process finds one of Robert Baratheon's bastard sons. Meanwhile, a tournament is held to celebrate his appointment as Hand of the King. Tyrion returns to the north to attempt to recruit more men from the Night's Watch, but finds that many suspects he was involved in the attempted murder of Bran. After he leaves Westeros, Tyrion is captured by Catelyn Stark under suspicion that he tried to murder her son. Episode 5 is titled The Wolf and the Lion, and this, of course, refers to Ned Stark and Jaime Lannister. And this is where the show really starts to speed up. In this episode, while transporting Tyrion Lannister to stand trial for the attempted murder of Bran Stark, Catelyn Stark and her bannermen are attacked by savages. Tyrion saves Catelyn's life by beating a man to death with a shield. In King's Landing, Arya hears Lord Varys discussing the arrest of Tyrion Lannister and the war which is sure to ensue. Meanwhile, Ned, while investigating another of Robert Baratheon's bastard children, is ambushed by Jaime Lannister and speared through the leg for his supposed involvement in Tyrion's arrest. Episode 6 is titled A Golden Crown, and this episode features one of the coolest, if not hardest to watch, scenes in the first season. In this episode, Tyrion Lannister manages to talk his way into a trial by battle. If he wins his freedom. He hires a mercenary named Bronn to fight for him, who murders his challenger, making Tyrion a free man. Meanwhile, Ned Stark makes the discovery that got the previous Hand of the King killed. Joffrey Baratheon, heir to the throne, is not King Robert's son, but Jaime's. Far away, Daenerys proves herself to the Dothraki people by devouring an entire horse heart. Her brother, angry that she is getting more attention from the Dothraki than he is, threatens her. Khal Drogo finally offers him a crown, but not the one he thought he'd get. This one is made of molten gold, and when poured onto his head, kills him. So, it was pretty cool. Episode 7 is titled You Win or You Die, and this is the first time in the show where those famous words are spoken. In this episode, as tensions between the Starks and Lannisters increases, King Robert Baratheon returns from a hunting trip mortally wounded, and following his death, Joffrey is installed as king. Ned reveals to Cersei that he knows that Jaime is Joffrey's real father. He reveals this information to the council, but is betrayed by them and imprisoned. Daenerys is saved from an assassination attempt by her friend and former spy, Jorah Mormont. She and her Dothraki army swear to attack King's Landing and reclaim the throne. Episode 8 is titled The Pointy End. The name of this episode references a conversation between Jon Snow and Arya Stark way back at the beginning of the season, when Jon gave Arya Needle. In this episode, at the Wall, Jon Snow and the Night's Watch find the bodies of two men who had been missing for weeks. Their bodies had not decomposed despite having been dead for days. During the night, one of the corpses comes back to life and, impervious to death, by stab wound, only dies when Jon lights it on fire. Some members of the Watch take this as proof that the White Walkers have returned. In King's Landing, the Lannisters attempt to detain the two Stark girls. Sansa is held captive, but Arya escapes. Cersei tells Sansa that if her father swears loyalty to Joffrey in front of the kingdom, his life will be spared. Meanwhile, Daenerys and her Dothraki troops attack a village and take prisoners. During a duel with one of the warriors of the village, Khal Drogo is gravely wounded. Episode 9, quite possibly the most important episode of the season, is titled Baelor. And in this memorable episode, we of course see the demise of Ned Stark, the moral compass of the show thus far. In this episode, much to Daenerys' dismay, her husband Khal Drogo has become terribly ill from the duel injury which has become infected. She enlists the help of a witch's blood magic to attempt to save his life. Despite protests from the Dothraki, she goes ahead with it anyway. In King's Landing, Ned Stark is forced to swear allegiance to Joffrey Baratheon in front of the entire kingdom, meeting the Lannisters' terms to spare his life. However, Joffrey goes back on his promise and has Ned beheaded as his daughters watch on in horror. Episode 10 is the final episode of the first season and is titled Fire and Blood. In this episode, chaos erupts in the kingdom after Ned Stark's death. The North has become independent and declared Ned's eldest son Robb the king in the North, rather than side with one of the remaining Baratheons, Stannis or Renly. Arya has cut her hair and gone into hiding as a boy named Harry, joining a group of Night's Watch recruits bound for the Wall. Sansa is still trapped in King's Landing with Joffrey, whose cruelty knows no bounds. He forces her to look at her father's severed head on a stick and slaps her when she refuses to obey him. Meanwhile, the Lannisters have named Tyrion the Hand of the King, hoping he will keep Joffrey in check. Back in the Dothraki camp, Daenerys has found that her unborn child is dead, following the evil spell the witch used to bring Khal Drogo back to life. The Khaleesi chains the witch to Drogo's funeral pyre and sets it ablaze along with her petrified dragon eggs. She then walks into the blaze herself. The next morning, she is found unscathed, holding 3 newborn baby dragons. So that is a summary of each episode, and now we're all on the same page. So let's get into how I feel about certain characters from this season. For starters, let's talk about some characters that I like, since this is by far the shortest list. Obviously, I like Ned Stark. He is a man of honor, and he loves his family more than himself. In the end, he is killed by mercy and loyalty. Mercy towards the Lannisters, and loyalty for the king. I have a lot of respect for him, and of course it makes sense that you'd like him because it seems like the show was written to make you like him. I also like Khal Drogo, even though his time on the show was short-lived. He was an interesting character, despite his lack of screen time. And of course, I love Jason Momoa in everything he's in, so not hard there. I do like Tyrion Lannister, and so far he's the only Lannister that I like. Syrio, Arya Stark's sword instructor, is also a character from the season that I really liked. He was very skilled and brave and seemed to have a strength of character that hopefully Arya will carry with her moving forward. Now for some characters that I don't necessarily hate, but they rub me the wrong way. Jon Snow makes the top of this list. Despite his redeeming qualities, which he has a few, he has a massive chip on his shoulder, which always makes a character someone that I'm not a huge fan of. And he doesn't learn very quickly. I feel that I will like him more in the future, but for now I'm not a huge fan. Secondly, we have Littlefinger. Now, of course, no, he would be close to the hate list because of the whole betrayal of Ned Stark thing, but he did warn him, and he's kind of that kind of guy, so, you know, I don't give him a pass, but I'm not going to count it against him as heavy as I normally would. With him, I get the feeling with this character that he will evolve into a character that I hate more and more as the show goes on, as he is the typical backstabbing, opportunist character that will always take advantage of people when it suits him. But for now, like I said, he's a middle ground. I don't really hate him all the time. He sometimes does things that are okay, sometimes he does things that are really bad, but I'm sure as the show goes on, I'll hate him. Next up, we have Theon Greyjoy. This character, although not all that important so far, also rubs me the wrong way. He seems to be a character who has a serious little man syndrome, and although the Starks treat him like family, he seems to take them for granted and may harbor a bit of resentment. Lastly, we have Sansa Stark. Now, with this character, I'm trying to take it easy since I know she is supposed to be a naive, immature young girl, but she is such a stereotypical teenage girl in this season that she is constantly whining and wanting this and that so much that she completely ignores the warnings of her father and essentially betrays her whole family on more than one occasion. So I'm not a huge fan of her. Alright, now that we've covered those two categories, let's discuss the characters I hate. For starters, we of course have Cersei Lannister, or as I like to call her, Queen Bitch. She is clearly the driving force in this season for almost every bad thing that happens. In this show, she serves as the archetype for the power-hungry queen who straight up has people murdered for getting in her way. Some real Hillary Clinton vibes coming off this character. Next up, we have Viserys Targaryen. Basically Hayden Christensen's Anakin Skywalker character without any of the redeeming qualities that Anakin had. He is a whiny, entitled brat who sold off his sister for an army, and straight up said he would let 1,000 men rape her if it got him the Iron Throne. He is delusional, self-centered, full of himself, and weak. All of which makes the scene where he gets his head encased by molten gold even more satisfying. Lastly, for characters I hate, we have, of course, Joffrey Baratheon, or should I say Joffrey Lannister, the incestual bastard child of Cersei and Jaime Lannister. He is literally the worst character I have ever seen in any TV show ever. He is stupid, weak-willed, cruel, power-hungry, and clearly mentally ill. He enjoys beating women, killing people, and long walks on the beach. He is the weakest link, and he should certainly be voted off the island. Well, I'm glad to get all that off my chest. So the last thing I would like to talk about are the houses. And at this point, which is my favorite and which is my least favorite? So at this moment, I think that the favorite should be obvious. I like the House Stark, the best right now. They seem to be the only family, except for Sansa, that doesn't have an insatiable lust for power and a desire to sit on the Iron Throne. They are just rulers and formidable warriors. We'll have to see where the story takes us from here, but for now, I'm Team Stark. As far as which family I hate the most right now, that would be the Lannisters. Now, this may not be the case if Joffrey were actually a Baratheon, because then the scales would possibly be tipped more their way. But as it stands, we have Queen Bitch, the whiny brat king, the incestuous knight who pushed a 10-year-old out of a tower to cover up his affair with his sister, and the man behind them all pulling the strings with all of his money, Tywin Lannister. The only redeeming quality for House Lannister at this moment is Tyrion, who is my favorite character in the show so far. An honorable mention can of course go to the Baratheons because by name, Joffrey belongs to them, and he's terrible. But also because if it wasn't for the drunken stupidity of King Robert Baratheon, the kingdoms wouldn't be in such of a shit show. Overall, I quite enjoyed the first season, and look forward to watching the second. The writing is tight, and the storytelling managed to hold my attention the entire time. I would rate this season a 7 out of 10, and that's in reference to every TV show I've ever watched. So that's actually a pretty high rating. What are your thoughts about the first season of Game of Thrones? Why don't you go ahead and let me know in the comments section below. For my sake, and the sake of any viewers that haven't seen the rest of the show, Please do not place any spoilers for later seasons in the comments section. Thank you for watching, and have a nice day. I'll see you next time. Congratulations on making it to the end of the video. If you did, I can assume you liked the content, and hopefully you'll subscribe and turn on the notification bell. If you haven't already, check out these links I have on the screen to see me on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. If you like my content and would like to support what I do here, there's a link to my Patreon account in the description, and a donation would be much appreciated. In any case, thanks for watching and have a nice day.